Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Variuco, and welcome to Personal Pans, conversations about belief, transformation, and all the weird things we experience. Tonight's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Holly Laurent, writer, comedian, director, performer, actor, podcast host, and overall amazing person. We talked about a lot of really deep, vulnerable things, which is why I think it was hard for me to get the second part of this episode out. We talked about moving from being a people pleaser to acting in intentional directness, about whether or not this world is hell. And we talked about setting boundaries and then subsequently feeling guilty about it. And we also talked a lot about grief, and I talked about the grief that has shaped the last 5-ish years of my life. And again, it was just really wonderful to talk to Holly, but it's always a little anxiety producing to put anything vulnerable out to the world. But I do hope that you enjoy this conversation.
And like, I really need to be in therapy again. I haven't been in therapy for a few years, but I remember I started to feel like I was spinning my wheels because I was like, my therapist is always saying the exact same thing. And I can just start telling myself this as I move forward. But the thing that she kept fucking telling me was, she was just like, I really think it's about accepting others and having compassion for them, and accepting yourself and having compassion for you. And now we're back to that verse of like, love others the way you love yourself. Speaking of projection, when I hate myself, I tend to treat people hatefully. So, and I'm projecting my, it's funny. I recently had a friend call me and really unleash on me for something I didn't know was coming. I didn't know I had done. I hadn't intended any harm. And this unleashing was so painful and jarring to me. And it took me a long time to process it. But like, what I ultimately have come to believe of that encounter is that she was in an unmanageable amount of pain. And she's like, I got to give some of this to you. And baby, I felt it, and it was awful. And it made me go, oh my God, that's what you're feeling, that you had to send over here. It was really bad. It really hurt. It really rocked me to my core. And I'm so sorry that you're feeling that way. Also, I am no longer going to be here as a sponge for that energy, because it's very, very real. Because the little inner child inside of me is looking to me to see what kind of caregiver I will be for her, and if I will protect her. And so now I'm like, that is my mission. But honestly, I feel like all the stuff we're talking about, from believers, non-believers, Republicans, Democrat, far right, far left, somewhere in the middle, living in a liberal society, watching democracy tumble and crumble into theocracy, losing right. I wonder if on a really like essential level, it's just everyone is basically saying, I cannot handle this pain, and I don't know what to do. And we don't have the skills, and we don't have, talk about trauma. A friend of mine was recently trying to get to the bottom of her vomit phobia. It's a word, but I can't remember, but she has a serious phobia of vomiting. And she did all of this work, and she was like looking into like emotional inheritance in terms of like ancestral, like trauma in our DNA.
Yeah. Epigenetics. Fascinated by it. Yes.
And she was talking about how when her family immigrated to the United States, they were on a boat, that the underneath part where they were for however many weeks or months, or terrible crossing it was, there was like ankle deep vomit, like going back and forth with the like boat, because everyone was trapped in there and so sick. And she's like, I wonder if, because she couldn't figure out like in her timeline of her life, like, why does she have this phobia? I was like, that's really interesting. And we started talking about how immigration is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a country that not only was built on like genocide of like the native inhabitants of this land, but also, so it was a genocide. Then the country built on top of slavery. Like, so the country was built by humans as possessions, right?
Yeah.
And then it got filled up with traumatized people. Like immigrating is so, and then you like throw in things like, and then everybody can have a gun too. This like this country like built with like generationally traumatized humans. So even though your name is Justin and you're living in Ohio and you love AR-15s or whatever, you're not thinking of yourself as a traumatized person, maybe, but it doesn't mean that you're not, even just your genetic inheritance.
Oh my God, Holly, my brain is exploding. I have so many things I want to say. I don't think I'll remember them all. When I rewatch this, when I edit it, I will email you. But there is this book, there's this author. I bought the books. I've been meaning to read it. I think this is my sign that I need to read them, by Heinz Kohut. And it's the analysis of self and the restoration of self. And one of my college professors, the only one I'm still in touch with, he was encouraging me to read these because he was talking about what he sees in this society. This is something that he and I have been talking about for like, almost 20 years at this point, narcissistic injury. And people being like on a social scale, on an individual scale, being traumatized and not having language for it. And worse, being told that having trauma, even acknowledging that you're having trauma, is like being a pussy and being a coward. As many steps forward as we've made with like trying to like bring empathy into the conversation, it's still seen as this thing of weakness, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can't be, and this is Alice Miller 100%, if you, again, and also goes back to the Sermon on the Mount, if you can't be empathic with yourself, you can't be empathic with other people. This was actually so when I was in college, I was working with a professor who was doing an assessment of the Cook County domestic violence program. And so I took all that domestic violence research that she was doing and I put an Alice Miller analysis on it, because I was so fascinated by the way that violent men were talking about their violence towards their partners. And so then I looked at that and also looked at, so there was this like 400 question, like multiple choice question on this like intake survey for this domestic violence program. And were you physically abused? No. Were you spanked? Yes. Right? Oh yeah, well, I was spanked. That's not bad, but you can't call it abuse, because if you're abused, oh, there's something wrong with you. Again, because of this narrative that we have about abuse victims, that somehow you're causing it, right? And that it is a sign of weakness to act as if something happened to you that you couldn't control, right? So that it's like, oh, if you can't identify what happened to you, you certainly can't see what you do to your partners as abusive. It's their fault. Whoa. They pushed your buttons. They made you do this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whoa.
And so I didn't think about this until you mentioned this. I think we are experiencing this on a national scale right now, of people with all of this unresolved narcissistic trauma, and they are blaming everybody else for what's going on, right? Yeah. They're not looking at the people who are and to top it all off, right? This unmooring of all these institutions that we have been taught are going to save us and protect us and keep us safe. They're all crumbling right now. So isn't that like when your parent isn't taking care of you, and so you cannot even face the reality of what is happening? You just immediately start dissociating or blaming yourself, or again, externalizing and blaming other people. It is so hard to take stock, both personally and socially, when things are not what you are told they are supposed to be. And again, I think we're seeing that rise of that narcissistic reaction. Again, Alice Miller always talks about it. I think about your friend, right? Alice Miller is very clear, and I believe this, that when you are reacting in the moment, like irrationally emotional about something, and unless it's something very serious, like someone has like killed your dog or something like that, right? If you're having this deep emotional reaction to a misunderstanding or something else, it has nothing to do with the present situation and everything to do with what this present situation reminds you of that happened in your childhood. and all of the ways in which your mom didn't give you the attention you need, your dad didn't like hug you enough, nobody saw who you were. And so as soon as you hit that, again, that narcissistic injury, explosions, like nothing, no interpersonal reaction, like interaction that at least I know you're capable of could cause anything like that. Like that is those explosive blowups. And again, I have thought about this a lot because I grew up with a family who never directly communicated.
Yep.
And then it would just build up and build up and build up and build up. And I have so much trauma and anxiety about holidays. And I do not celebrate holidays because every time the family got together, oh boy, all that shit that happened 40 years ago, we're all going to hear about it now. It's like, you could have had this conversation 40 years ago, or you could have had a thoughtful conversation about it now and not let it turn into these explosive fireworks, because that also is narcissistic to expect, like you said, your friend to carry this for you, to expect all the people around you to carry this for you because you don't know how, and you're not willing to be vulnerable enough to say to somebody, I'm really hurting. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Can you help me carry this?
Yeah.
Like that's something too. It's so funny you talking about like my kind of mom energy, because if somebody needs something, I don't know if it's the Aquarius, I don't know, or again, trauma history, like if someone needs something, I will drop everything and I will be there for you.
Yeah.
If you expect something out of me without directly asking for it, no, figure it out. Like, use your words. If you use your words, again, I'll drop everything and I'll be there and be present for you in the way that you need. You have to ask, right? It is so scary to do it. I get it. I get it because I struggled with this for decades, right? It is so hard to be vulnerable and come from that place of, saying, I don't know what to do. I'm having this experience. I don't know even what to feel about it. I get it, but you have to learn to take that step because, again, in my experience, everybody is having that kind of difficulty. And the relief, I was so worried for such a long time that if people saw who I really was, they would just reject me outright.
Yes.
And like in the past few years, I've just been so direct and so open, and it unlocks things in people where they're just immediately like real in a way that they aren't with other people. Again, immediately, because it's like, oh, I can actually talk and be seen and not be judged and not have shit dumped on me. Cool. Yeah.
How did you move from like a people pleasing default mode into intentional directness? This is fascinating to me because this is what I need more of. Oh my God.
So man, okay. So the big thing was really in the past few years, my grandmother, my boyfriend at the time, and my aunt all passed away within a year and a half.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And thank you. And before that, I mean, things kind of like opened up because my grandparents helped raise me, right? And in 2012, my grandfather passed away, and he had dementia for years, and it was just so brutal to watch.
Yeah.
And then he passed, and then it basically a very small family lost almost everyone, and then my relationship with my mother fell apart. And it's like, I couldn't carry anything. I physically couldn't carry anything anymore.
Yeah.
And it became very clear immediately who I was friends with because they were letting me carry everything for them, and who actually saw me for me.
Yeah.
And so I had to be pushed to that point. And I'll get into the magic part of that in a second, but like I had to be pushed to that point where I physically couldn't, emotionally, like there was nothing, like you put a feather on me and I'd crumble,
Yeah.
So I just couldn't. And it was setting very hard boundaries and being direct with people and being very honest with people, and not getting wrapped up when people were trying to draw me back in. I was just like, no, man, I'm out. Like, and no malice or anything like that. It was just, I was kind of zeroed out. And so it allowed me to rebuild in that way. And again, every single friendship, every single relationship I had, it was like, is this real? Is this not? It was this based off of, because I'm capable and because I've been trained this way, I can carry a lot. Do I want to though? Like after all of that happened, especially because my boyfriend at the time, like he was sick with pancreatic cancer and I was taking care of him up into his death. I can do a lot. I know what I'm capable of. Only a few people get that from me. You know, it's like, who should I be present for? Because who do I know in my life who would be present for me in the same way that I know I can be present for people?
Yeah.
So again, I feel like I'm more open, but I feel like I'm much better about setting boundaries, because it's just like, no, I love you, and no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And that is not something I need to carry, right? Another great book. I feel like this is Vanessa's book recommendation hour, but when I say no, I feel guilty. It was written in the 70s, so there's some like kind of problematic stuff in there, but it's such a great book because it talks about how we're all raised to be indirect communicators, not directly ask for what we want, hint at things, pressure people, be passive aggressive.
Right.
And so from that, it's just like, there's so much power in just saying, no, I don't want to do that. Like, if you're like, oh, I can't because of this, it's like, oh, well, I can move and do this instead. And it's like, if you're just like, no, I don't have the energy for that, done. And again, it's training yourself, right? Reprogramming your brain to say, like, if this person is upset with me because I have said no, that's on them. That's not on me.
Yeah.
Period. Right.
Yeah.
Because having autonomy and valuing autonomy for other people means that people get to say no.
Yeah.
And you have to abide that. Right.
Yeah.
You might not like it, but you have to abide it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Man, you just made me think of on Love on the Spectrum. On
Which
Netflix.
I started watching because of you.
there's a like coach who helps the person with autism spectrum disorder work on their communication skills for the date they're going to go on or whatever. And it's interesting because a lot of what she's teaching them to do is to stop being direct. Because she's like, well, do you see how if you say it like that, it could hurt someone's feelings? So we say it like this so as not to hurt. And that's kind of crazy now, hearing like you're like from another angle. It's like, oh, we all got groomed for that. And now we're all in like unmanageable pain that we're not sure how to, you know, and we're all just like, what's your thing today? Anxiety or depression? It's going to be one of the, you know, like, and
exactly.
so interesting. That is so fascinating. Because the thing with this person who kind of did this unleash thing, I was like, wow, I heard a voice in my head say clearly, like, this is not my friend. And then when I was like, because I don't feel safe.
Of course. Yes.
And like, you know, but it made me realize like, oh, let me look back over the last, like, even just 2 or 3 years of encounters with this person, the dynamic with this person. I think I always was just not having needs, saying, it's okay. It can all be about you. I will not expect anything from you. And yet I will give everything. I'm like, oh, it's been like this. So then it's like, take, give, take, give. No, not a reciprocity. And then I think that person just was like, okay, can I go this far? Which then to me felt like abuse. And I'm like, and so now I have a boundary there where I have said, like, I really wish you well. I really always intended well wishes for you. And I'm so sorry that through miscommunication or whatever, like something other than that was communicated to you, because my intention was only for good things for you. And I will continue that. But I am no longer here for this. And then I have had the most insane guilt, Vanessa, from, I know that that's the right thing. And I know that I have to show my inner child that I will be a good caretaker and protector and not let that keep happening. But I have honestly, with a few of the boundaries that I have learned how to start implementing in my life, I get such instantaneous guilt from them. And then I do the thing of like, am I that person who just cuts people off? And it goes back to like what we were saying about like, when I'm like, when we talk about God, are we really talking about ourselves? Because this God that we're describing is capable of both good and bad things, of hurtful things and helpful things. And so are we. Like, you know, God cast Lucifer out of heaven. God cast Adam and Eve out of the garden. God cast, you know, the people of Israel to wander in the desert for 40 years. And I'm like, oh, this guy's casting a lot of people out. And then I'm like, oh, but like, I was thinking about that recently because I'm like, oh, wait, I'm capable of casting people out. And I have said no more. That's not acceptable treatment or a friendship that I'm willing to be inside of because it makes me feel unsafe. And I don't want to be in a position of having to feel like I have to protect myself, because the way I am with my friends is that we hold space with each other and safe, and it's a back and forth. And sometimes I might take for a solid year because I'm in that space. But then when it comes time for your divorce or whatever, like I'm here for you and I will give, you know, like,
Yes.
but yeah, the guilt of like, whoa, have I, again, we're back to the semantics where I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I've set a healthy boundary. And in that person's mind, they're like, Holly cast me out. She cut me off. We're no longer friends. And I'm like, whoa. And that's so hard for me too, to be like, and one of the things I said to her when I kind of said goodbye was like, it hurts me so bad to be the face of the monster that hurt you. Like, I can tell you're hurt and I see that you really truly believe that it's me that did this to you. And I hate being the face of the monster. Also, that's outside of my control too. And in any, like, think about any breakup, like you're the one that went through the breakup and you're hurting and in pain, but on the other person's side, you're the bad guy, you know? Like, and we hate being the bad guy. I think I've heard Margaret Atwood talk about religion in general is here because like we all really want to be the good guy, quote unquote, you know?
Right, exactly.
We really want to believe we're the good guy. And that also, it really makes me think about, even with this like Roe stuff this week and with the like minority rule that is really quickly taking over our country, where it's like, wait, most people want this right that you're taking away. And in fact, those of you who are taking it away are also going to suffer in a myriad of ways, you know, and whether you can see that or not, but like, I keep thinking like, oh, if you think about it in storytelling or movies or books or anything, like the most bone-chilling villains are not like, ha ha ha, I love to cause mayhem and evil, I want to hurt people. They actually are the ones who think they fully, deeply believe they could pass a lie detector test, that they are the good guy. They are the white savior. They are the good guy in every way, shape, and form. They believe it. And that's what makes like a villain like actually dangerous. And I'm sure we all do it to some extent, you know. I play my part in the breakdown of this, you know, relationship, but I throw all the onus on you, you know. Like it's so complicated. And as a human being, my friend said this the other day, I'm like, oh my gosh, so like just being in relationships with other human beings means it's always going to be so complicated and messy and like painful and everything. You know what's funny? My parents recently sent my mom called it a care package. She said, I'm sending a care package to your house. Will you give it to your nephew, Iggy, who lives here in LA? And he lives in a place where he can't get packages, so everyone sends them to my house. She said, I'm sending a care package to Iggy. Will you give it to him? And I said, yeah. I said, Iggy, there's a package here for you from your grandparents. Do you want to come get it? And he opened it up and it was very clear that it was a book. And I'm like, a care package, it seems like there's going to be like some like pirates booty in there.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I'm like, a care package. And it was like very clearly a book, and he opened it up and it was a Bible with his name engraved in gold on the front. Specifically, it was the version of the Bible that's called The Message. It's like the street language, like interpretation of the Bible.
My mother has that. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
And he opened it up and he's 20 and he read the very first, he was like, let me see what this is all about. He's like, he's like, I wasn't raised with any of this stuff. And he opened it up and he read the very first words, the very first sentence of it. And he goes, oh, wow. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. He's like, yep. And he slams it closed and he goes, that just is another evidence of my theory that we're all in hell. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, he didn't say he created heaven and hell, which is the binary that we think is the like dualistic, like tribal, like us or them. It says heaven and earth. And he's like, this is hell. We're in exile. Doesn't it feel like we're in exile? The very fact of like what you were saying earlier, Vanessa, of like everyone you love is going to die. Being like having love, which is the thing we most long for, is connectedness in this human experience. Like in the end, we're all going to essentially like die alone. We're going to lose everyone we love. Like, oh yeah, that feels like hell. Like, are we in exile here? Is this hell? Like it's I was over the pandemic when I was watching everything on earth. I watched this hour-long Terrence McKenna interview where Terrence McKenna in I think the early 90s was talking about like if it feels like things are speeding up, it's not just a sensation that you're having, like things really are speeding up. And I'm like, wow, if I look back over the course of my life, I am experiencing that like sensation big time. And especially like, I feel like in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, things are really speeding up. And his thing was, he was like, things are going to really accelerate and things are going to get really weird. And then he died of a brain tumor, but he was talking way back in the 80s. He was talking about like the binary will fall away and stuff of like, even like gender and everything. And if I had heard that in the 80s, I would have been like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand what you mean by that.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And like the things he was kind of talking about, like are happening. And his idea of it, I think, was that like the binary will go away because we will be leaving the material human experience and consciousness going on to live on in another form. And that we as humans are kind of like that cush species that was like when fish started coming out of the water and then like getting like the in between. And his thing is like, we're like the fish that are now starting to come out onto and it's part of why we feel so like what you and I've been talking about this whole time of like, we don't know what it is. We don't know if any of these what's true and what's real or whatever. We're kind of like, well, here's what I believe right now, or here's my best guess, or just simply like you and I have been like reveling in, which is, I don't know. But like, it feels like we're getting, our consciousness has evolved to the point where we're like, we know there's a lot we don't know.
Yes.
And we're limited to, we only have 5 senses. We only experience 3 dimensions. We're very limited, but we're starting to be like, oh, it seems like there's probably a lot we don't know. You can call that God. You can call that, like, you're on mushrooms and you're like, oh yeah, everything is definitely connected. And my ego tells me I am separate from you, but I'm not. But like, I don't know. Terrence McKenna kind of thought it was going toward like, the reason we feel so bananas is because essentially we're the fish growing legs, and we will eventually like leave this water we've been living in this whole time, the material experience, and our consciousness will move on in another way. And I'm like, oh man, I can't even think about that.
No, of all the other shit, right? My brain.
Like, I don't want to put my consciousness online. I just want to, I think like total annihilation and disappearing death would be fine. Or if it's, that my essence will come back in some other way. I don't know, man. I'm getting really tired. It's so funny because my mom these days is like, she's pushing the Christianity hard because she's feeling her age right now, and I'm just like, and she's like, I don't want to be in eternity without you. I was like, do you think I want my consciousness to exist forever? That sounds like hell. Like, exactly. No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's so weird that like, out of the mouth of babes, this little 20-year-old, my nephew, just being like, oh yeah, this is hell.
I know.
I love it too. He slams it down. He's like, yeah, got everything I need from that book.
I mean, it's pretty beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I'm coming to Chicago in September so we can meet in person.
Oh my God, I would love that. I would love that so much.
I can't believe we love each other this much and we've never been in each other's existence.
Technically we have.
Presence.
Technically we have, very briefly.
Oh, really?
The tall extra in your short film?
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
I know. But
okay.
I had no idea at the time that like you were a soul sister waiting for this relationship to materialize.
That's right. You're in Brought to You by Satan. I was telling you about my short film and you're like, no duh. I was in it.
But the listeners need to know about this movie. So yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. No, that was like that was one of those like post-grief, like Katie being like, hey Vanessa, do you want to like come and do a thing? I was like, yeah, get me out of the house, please.
That is amazing, the amount of loss you experienced in an amount of time. That's life altering completely.
That's it. That's exactly it. It's like, that's why like Bart was trying to like, corner me on beliefs. I'm like, dude, nothing means anything. Like, It's fine. You're still like, it struck me as like, he is still trying to, like, intellectually, he doesn't want to believe in anything. I think emotionally, he still wants to believe in something, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, no, nothing
Yeah.
means anything. Whatever it means is whatever meaning we put on it.
Right.
That's it.
But when you're like, well, I've been to hell and back, so now I'm like doing the thing of like, I'll just take buckets of water to people who are still in it, knowing that we'll be in it again.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell my friends who are in absolute hell at the moment, I'm always like, oh, I wish I could give you the fast forward button, because there is a day out there where you will feel better.
Yes.
You will have full hours, long afternoons where it never crosses your mind and you feel peace and joy. Like, it is out there.
Yes.
But the only way there is through the fucking flames of hell.
That's exactly it. That's why, like, anytime I see somebody post something about grief online, I'm just immediately in their DMs like, you need to talk about anything at any point, you message me. I've experienced multiple forms of grief, because there's also that moment too where you stop thinking about it all the time and then you feel guilty for not being sad about it, because it's like, no, it's just like for me, I think I have it like the grief for me is like a weight training metaphor. It's just a thing that you learn to carry, and you only get strong enough to carry it by continuing to carry it.
Yeah.
And like any weight, sometimes the weight of the world is too much, and like the littlest thing can make you crumble. That's just how grief operates, because it's always there, and that's okay too. And it's just learning to roll with those punches and accept that as it is.
Man, that's such a beautiful thing to reach out to people with, of like, because that landscape of grief can be so isolating, because you're like, I am now a different person. I am a new animal. I am now a grief animal, and everyone else is acting like everything's normal. And I'm like looking out of new eyeballs. I'm like,
and it's so interesting because the psychology term that most people are familiar with is the 5 stages of grief, and that got debunked. That was actually like the woman who came up with it on her deathbed like recanted and was like, that's all wrong. I think she was like, had terminal cancer, and was just like, oh no, this was like a grief experience for a specific set of people in the specific cultural context. It is not the actual experience at all. And so people all like go into grief already with a misconception about what grief looks like. And so I usually will reach out to someone and not say like, hey, let me know if you need anything, because in that immediate grief, you don't even know what you fucking need at that point. It's just like, if you need a distraction, if you need someone to cry to, if you need a meal, because chances are if you're upset, you're not feeding yourself. And it's just easier if somebody comes in with like food or just drops it off at your door. Like that's it. Yeah.
Man, I was just a teacher that I was listening to recently said that he fully believes that what love is listening to people talk about their pain. Like the most loving thing you can do is listen when someone talks about their pain. I was like, wow, yeah. That's an unfun role to be in. I've felt myself before when a friend starts like sobbing to me about something where I'm like, whoa, this is a lot. I don't know what to do. And then like, I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about it. We didn't know it. And I'm like, oh God, there's a lot. And then I've tried to learn how to, and I think some of cannabis and some of psilocybin has taught me this of just like, then I start to freak out because my friend is freaking out. And then I start to breathe and go, it's okay. They can feel this and it will move through them, and I can hold the space for this, and it's okay. I can be with someone who's crying this hard. I can be with someone who is in this much pain. I can do it. You're right. Like we are capable of amazing things. And it's love.
And this like to go back to what you said about there were 2 things that I remember now, the things I wanted to talk about like those positive affirmations for yourself, right? Yeah. So one, I was thinking about it on a social level, because also it's like, if you believe that things can get worse, then you have to believe and hold space for the idea that things can get better and that you have the power to make them better, right? Because I see this, especially now with like this whole political discourse about like, well, it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. It's like, who is deciding that it only gets worse, right? Like you can't, you know?
Right. It could get worse, but it could also get better.
It could also get better. And it's getting worse because people are choosing to do worse things. So why not organize people to do better things and make the world better, right? You have to hold both of those. Secondly, the book that kind of that really opened up, I think, like my magical practice and my way of looking at the world was The Crack in the Cosmic Egg by Joseph Chilton Pearce. And he specifically in the foreword to that book, because he kind of inadvertently became one of the figureheads of the human potentialist movement in the 1970s through a lot of his works, because his whole deal basically is that like consciousness determines reality, and even on a physical atomic level, consensus consciousness shapes reality. So he talks about in the foreword of his book that his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and of course the doctors have all these like terrible prognoses, and he was like, nope. And so he ended up like watching all of these comedies with her, like anything joyful, was reading her like books about healing, and like while she was sleeping, like 24 hours a day, was basically trying to feed her brain with as many like positive, happy things as possible. And she went into remission. You know, this was before like chemotherapy drugs and everything had been developed. And then was fine for like a few years. And then the cancer came back, and it was just a whole bunch of doom and gloom again. And he really, I think, believed that the doctor's prognosis for her, for her disease, like she just lost all hope. And so there was no way of like kind of turning the corner again for her, you know? Yes.
Wow.
So, and it's that, and I talked to Bart about this too, in terms of like, just, you know, I had this conversation with my grandfather when he was sick and he had dementia and he was bedridden, and I didn't find out until later that he was mostly nonverbal. Like I grew up with them, but once I moved out, like I wasn't seeing them all the time. But you know, the dementia ebbs and flows. And I just like I knew that day when I woke up in my bones, and like, for whatever reason, it was Mother's Day and we were going over there. I was like, I have to tell him I love him. I just knew. I was like, something has to happen on this day. And so we started talking, and I had already started changing my life because I just saw the way my whole family lived, and like, talk about epigenetic trauma, like the theocratic, like the Christo-fascist uprising right now, like the visceral feeling I have because my grandparents like grew up in World War II. It like they were taken by Nazis into labor camps. There is a real fear that I don't think was taught, because they didn't really talk about their experiences until I was 14, of like, oh, they're coming for us. I got to pack a bag and I have to go. Like after George W. got elected, I was like, I have to go. I have to go. I have to go. Like it was in my cells, right? So my grandfather like didn't talk to me a lot growing up. Funnily enough, the dementia, like I think took away like his emotional boundaries first, because he started calling me his pretty princess. And it was like real, I was like 19. I was like, I'll take it. Like, this is great. And so it's Mother's Day, and I'm like, I got to tell him what's going on, or I got to tell him I love him. And I was also telling him about, like, I had signed up for Ladies Rock Camp, and I'd actually submitted a paper for this academic conference in Knoxville, because I knew, I was just like, I have to live differently than my family. All they think about is fear and keeping your head down and not trying anything, and not, safety. How can we be safe from Nazis, basically, And so I'm like talking to him about all this stuff, and I'm like crying because he's in such a bad way, and I feel so terrible for him. And he's holding my hand, and there's this pause, and I just go, I love you, Jajo. He's like, okay. Then he goes, enjoy every minute of your life because it's all you get. Spend time with nice people. And it was like, so again, this is a guy who like I saw every day, but didn't really talk to me when I was a kid. And I knew, I'm like, he knows he needs to give me something in this moment. He knows, like, he knows that he's like, I can get her out. Like, that's what it felt like, you know?
Wow.
And that's when I shifted everything. And that's when I quit my job and I started my own business. And I just like threw myself into building a life for myself that I wanted to see and that I wanted to live, you know?
Wow.
And it all just started with believing that good things were possible. That was it, because I had been raised with this idea that everything is disaster, the world is falling apart, like everything is chaos. And I just believed, and like, good things are possible, not even that they would happen, but I just started walking through the world, anticipating good things, believing in the possibility of good things, and everything fucking changed for me. Like I got all these opportunities. I was able to make jewelry for a living for several years. Like I taught in Canada, you know, like, and they flew me out to a conference in Canada because they found my work online, you know, like it was that kind of thing. And it was just from changing one little thing in my brain. So of course I believe that like anything is possible. Like if I could just do that for me, what can a whole group of people do for all of us, right? Like I think about this all the time.
Yeah. Wow. This is so amazing. And while you're talking, even especially synthesizing this idea of like grief and stuff too, I just realized I have to book you for my friend. I have to get a tarot reading from you for my friend right now. She lost her mom probably 6-7 years ago and has, been, learning about grief and facing it and trying to, and I just realized you're the perfect birthday present for her.
Amazing. Thank you.
So I'll text you about that as soon as we're off.
Perfect. Good.
Because I'm so grateful that Katie, that KJS, as I call her, put us in each other's lives. I'm so grateful.
Oh my God, same. Again, it's like as soon as we started talking, it was like, oh, you're one of my people.
Yeah.
This is a thing that we should do. Yes.
And I'm so glad that you have a podcast because I can listen to you when I'm like taking a bath or doing dishes or whatever. And it's so cool because I want to know more of, not only do you have like an incredible book reference knowledge, that can be your next podcast of like book recommendations tailored to your trauma.
Oh my God, that's so good.
So good. And also book recommendations based on your trauma and where you are on the like spectrum of belief, grief, wherever you are of like,
Yeah.
What are the books I should be reading if I don't believe anything right now? What are the books I should be reading if I am having guilt in boundaries right now? I mean, you have an encyclopedic mind and I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's weird because for me with ADHD, my thing is I have trouble reading books that are like informational. Like I can kind of read books that are like a thriller, or I really like memoirs and essays and stuff. But if it's like a book where I'm trying to like learn and retain things, I have to listen to it.
Interesting. Yes.
And so, and that's why I've fallen in love with now podcasts being a thing in the world, because not only can I hang out with you as a friend when I need a friend by listening to your podcast, but it's how I learn most of my stuff nowadays.
I love it. Well, especially with all the trauma of just like living in this society right now. Like, again, one of the things that happened to me in grief was I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't listen to music anymore. Like it was too much because I was so raw and so tender. It was just like, oh, anything that accesses any kind of real emotional anything, like my brain's just like, nope, this is not for you right now. Like, and that's when I really realized too, like, oh, your body does so much protective stuff just to keep you alive, right? Where your brain is like, how do we keep the organism alive? It's like, okay, she can only feel this much right now. And then you slowly kind of grow into that. And then your brain is like, okay, can we try this much? You know? And it's like, you slowly grow into that. And you're like, how about this? Like too much. And then back, you know?
Yeah.
And so, because I remember like finally listening to a CD all the way through again. I was like, oh my God, I can finally listen to albums again. Like it was just not anything cohesive, anything emotionally evocative. No, that was not happening for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely get that.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
My
goodness.
God, Holly.
Can't wait to hug you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Yes.
How tall are you?
I'm 6 feet tall.
Oh, I love that. I want to be able to reach things on the top shelf. I want to be tall so bad.
But here's the thing, when you are tall, people are constantly, even strangers, asking you to reach things on tall shelves for them.
That's your burden. Because the rest of us, we have to go find a step stool and it's annoying.
I mean, listen, I'll take it, right? Like, I like it.
And a lot of my female friends who are tall, they've been like, oh, it's been so hard because of, again, the male supremacy, patriarchal, misogynistic shit of like, here's how femme should present based on what we want in terms of whatever. And it's like, ooh, so I think that too. I feel like tall is a little bit like, no, what if I can reach it on my fucking own, motherfucker? I love it. Like, I want to be tall so bad. I think I'm 5'6", but I say 5'7".
You can take it, round up, like that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have more volume in my hair since I've gone naturally curly, so I can say 5'7".
That counts. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course.
So funny. I've been straightening my hair for 20 years and I just recently was like, I'm going to start like letting my hair be curly. And I feel really like weird and vulnerable about it. Like it's an identity thing. Like it's like I look at myself and I'm like, that's not what I look like. It's weird. And I'm like, no, that's actually what I look like. I've just been changing it for 20 years.
Oh my God, it's so funny. So I have kept my hair long for most of my life and I just like it. I just like it long. And my grandmother, she always wanted me to cut my hair. And she even tried to pull the like, oh honey, but I would like to see you with short hair before I die. I was like, sorry, Babchi, that's not going to happen. You trying that shit with me, please.
So funny. I love it.
Yeah, but it becomes, again, it's the image you see in the mirror every day. And you again, neural pathways, right? You develop this identity, this consciousness about who you are, and that changes. And you're like, is this still me? Like, who am I?
Right. And I even wonder, like, you know, because the few times I've cut my hair, I like freaked out and cried for 2 weeks and was like, never again, grow it back out. And I've always had it long. And I've been like thinking about that a lot too, where I'm like, oh, is this me presenting a femme thing as a survival thing that I'm not even conscious of like, to attract a like stronger, bigger one of me to like, if I look like this, you know, it's sort of like peacocking or whatever of like, but for survival. Cause I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's that deep. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Cause like, it's not that sustainable. Like trying to be femme, like, man, the upkeep, babe, the upkeep.
Yes, because again, I always wore black clothes in high school, but I could never be a goth because I cannot be fucking asked to wear mascara. Like I just can't, you know, like it's there's so much different identity, and especially like being a woman, like all this kind of, you know, or being femme presenting, it's like that. Again, these expectations, like, but I don't want to do any of that. I don't care about any of that, you know, like, but you are seen as less than or get othered. Or again, right. Since I was in high school, the number of people are like, oh, you're gay, right? It's like no. What?
Well, then where's the mascara, honey?
Where's the mascara? And why are you not dating a man at all times? Like,
yeah.
The expectations for behavior. Yeah.
Well, Thank you so much for this time. I
Of
really needed it.
course.
I really
Good.
needed I had such brain fog today. I was like, oh, I might be a really bad conversationalist, but I was like, but I want to talk to and I need to talk to Vanessa anyway. And this has been so good for my soul. Thank you.
This has been so, I mean, it's been so good to A, see your face, B, talk to you. And like this, the depth of this conversation, it's been perfect. But before I hit the stop record, if you could just tell the audience where they can find you online.
My website is hollylaurent.com. All my stuff is on there. You can watch Brought to You by Satan and all that. I have some essays and other fun stuff on there. I'm really trying to pull back from social media, but I'm also Holly Laurent on Instagram. And my podcast is megathepodcast.com. And it's a comedy, it's an improvised satire from the staff of a fictional mega church. And it's a comedy where we try to laugh and bring levity to the belief systems that we were brought up in, and to lovingly punch up at powerful institutions that seek to repress or oppress us. And we're not punching down at people who believe, because just like you said, and like George Carlin says, like, I love people, I just don't like groups. Like, you know, and so I got nothing against people who believe, but I've, through doing Mega, the podcast, I have found what I didn't even know before I had this podcast. I didn't even know about the evangelical community or the religious trauma healing community. And that's been really, really helpful, because having this a lot of those people in those circles have found Mega, and they're like, oh, it's so therapeutic for me to laugh about this stuff, that as I'm kind of doing like emotional healing work through religious trauma, that it sort of helps me. And for our Patreon supporters, we have a midweek podcast. So our comedy podcast is called Mega, where we play characters and we improvise, and it's comedy. But we have a midweek podcast called a Mini, where we are ourselves and we deconstruct as ourselves. We deconstruct some of the ideas that come up on the Mega of different ways of believing that might keep you in pain or whatever. We talk about it. We talk like this, like what you and I are doing every week, me and my co-host, and it's my favorite stuff to talk about this stuff. So I can't wait to do it with you over a glass of wine or a soda pop or anything.
Oh my gosh, same. I'm so excited.
And then as soon as we get off, I'll text you about my friend's birthday tarot.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Thank you so much. I love you so much.
Oh,
and hey, listener, we're sending love to you too, listener, at the other end, the ears that are hearing our voices right now. Like, hey, hang in there. Vanessa said it. It could get worse, but hey, it could get better.
It could get better.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching, depending on where you found this podcast. You can find Holly at hollylaurent.com. You can also find Mega at megathepodcast.com. I'm also going to put a link to her short film, Brought to You by Satan. You might recognize someone in the background wearing this shirt. If you want to follow Personal Pans, you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Personal Pans. And I'm on Twitter often. I'm trying to be on there less, at Kali Butterfly. That's Kali Butterfly. You know, I meant what I said in that podcast. I really do think that as horrible as the world feels right now, there is a chance, and a good one, that we can make it better. So I hope that you have a playful and curious day, and I hope that you feel empowered to make the world a better place.